The first thing my mother said in that conference room was that I was confused and emotionally fragile. The second thing she said was that the company would be better off without me. If you've ever been blindsided by the people who raised you, pause here for a second. Like the story if it hits close to home. Comment where you're listening from. And subscribe, because what started in that room didn't end politely. My name is Evelyn Carter. I was 32 years old when my own family tried to erase me with a smile. The meeting took place on the 42nd floor of Carter Holdings, the glass and steel tower my grandfather built in the 1980s. Floor-to-ceiling windows, walnut table, bottled water no one touched. This wasn't supposed to be a confrontation. It was supposed to be routine. That's what my father, Richard Carter, had said when his assistant emailed me the invite the night before. Strategy alignment, he'd written, no agenda attached. That should have been my first warning. I arrived early, like I always did. I wore a navy blazer, pressed slacks, hair pulled back clean. I'd learned young that if I didn't look controlled, I wouldn't be taken seriously. I had spent 9 years building the compliance division for Carter Holdings, from nothing. At 32, I was Director of Regulatory Operations. My job was to keep us out of court, out of fines, out of headlines. I reported directly to the board. Or at least, I thought I did. My mother, Diane Carter, sat at the far end of the table when I walked in. She wasn't technically an executive. She hadn't worked a day in the company. But she sat there anyway, pearls at her throat, tablet in front of her, calm as if she owned the air. Next to her was my younger sister, Lauren Carter, 28, marketing VP, golden child, the one whose mistakes were called learning curves, while mine were called attitude. My father took the head of the table. He didn't look at me when I said good morning. The door closed, the glass dimmed. And that was when Diane leaned forward and folded her hands. "Evelyn," she said softly, "the way you speak to someone you're about to have committed. We're worried about you." I remember thinking, worried, people don't bring HR lawyers. Mark Reynolds, the company's outside counsel, was already seated to my right. I hadn't noticed him at first. That was intentional. Richard cleared his throat. "This isn't personal," he said. "It always is, when someone starts that way. But several board members have raised concerns about your judgment." I asked, "Which concerns?" I asked calmly, professionally. Lauren didn't meet my eyes. She stared at her phone, tapping once, twice, like she was bored. Mark slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, emails, Slack messages, my messages. Taken out of context, stripped of timelines, missing replies. Conversations where I'd warned about regulatory risk, where I'd pushed back on questionable deals, where I'd said no. "They think you're obstructive," Diane said. "Negative. You see problems everywhere." "That's literally my job," I said. Richard finally looked at me then. His eyes were tired. Not angry. Worse. Resigned. "You've become difficult, Evie." He hadn't called me that since I was 12. Mark spoke next, voice smooth. "The board is recommending a temporary leave of absence, paid, 6 months. During that time, your responsibilities would be redistributed." Redistributed was a clean word. It meant stripped. "And if I decline?" I asked. Diane smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly. Precisely. "Then we'd have to revisit your long-term fit with the company." I understood then. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an eviction notice. I looked at Lauren. "Did you know about this?" She sighed, finally glancing up. "Evelyn, don't make this dramatic. You've been intense lately. Maybe you do need time." Time. Silence. Removal. I thought about the audit I'd stopped last quarter. The offshore vendor Lauren insisted on using. The compliance flags I documented. The meeting where Richard had told me to let it go because the deal was family sensitive. I realized something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't about my mental health. It was about control. "I want this in writing," I said. Mark nodded. "Of course. And I want access to the board minutes where these concerns were raised." Richard's jaw tightened. "That won't be necessary." "It is if you're asking me to step away from a division I built," I said. Silence stretched. Diane tapped her tablet once. Then she said it. The line that changed everything. Evelyn, you need to understand something. This company is a family asset, and right now, you're behaving like a liability. Liability. From my mother. In front of witnesses. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I nodded once. Understood, I said. I'll review the paperwork. That was when Lauren relaxed. That was when my father exhaled. They thought compliance meant surrender. They didn't know I'd already started documenting everything 6 months earlier. Quietly. Methodically. Because when you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early that love is conditional and memory is selective. As I stood to leave, Diane added, "This is for your own good." I looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who'd missed my college graduation for a spa weekend, who forgot my 30th birthday but threw Lauren a destination party at 30, who taught me that silence was safer than honesty. "I'm sure you believe that," I said. I walked out of that room without my job, without my authority, and without the illusion that I still belonged. In the elevator, my phone buzzed. A calendar update. My access to the compliance servers had been revoked. That was the moment I stopped trying to save the family business. That was the moment I started protecting myself. And I had no idea yet how far they were willing to go to make sure I never came back. By the time I reached the lobby, the security badge clipped to my blazer was already dead. I discovered that when I tried to exit through the employee turnstile and the light flashed red, the guard, a man named Carlos who had nodded at me every morning for years, hesitated. He looked at the screen, then at me. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter," he said quietly. "My system says you're on leave." On leave. Less than 15 minutes after the meeting ended, I thanked him anyway. That's the habit you develop when you're raised to never cause a scene. I walked out through the public doors, heels clicking against marble that suddenly felt foreign under my feet. Outside, Chicago wind cut through my blazer. Late October, cold enough to sting. I stood there longer than necessary, staring up at the Carter Holdings logo etched into the glass facade. My last name. Their name. The name I'd spent a decade protecting. A small, ugly thought surfaced. They planned this. Not impulsive, not emotional. Strategic. That realization didn't hurt the way betrayal usually does. It steadied me. I drove home instead of going back to my apartment. Not because I wanted comfort, but because I needed something from my past. My childhood home sat in Evanston, 4 miles north, quiet street, manicured hedges, everything carefully curated to look respectable. Richard and Diane Carter still lived there. Lauren had moved into a condo downtown that my parents quietly paid for. When I pulled into the driveway, my father's car was already there. That surprised me. He usually stayed late at the office after difficult conversations. I let myself in with my old key. No one ever thinks to change the locks on someone they believe is harmless. Diane was in the kitchen, rearranging flowers that didn't need rearranging. She didn't look up when I entered. "I thought you'd take this well," she said. I set my bag down slowly. "You disabled my access before I reached the street." She adjusted a stem. "We needed to secure the company from me." She didn't say it, but it hung there. Richard sat at the breakfast nook, scrolling through emails. He glanced up. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "This is just going to escalate things." Escalate. Another word they liked. "I need the storage box from the basement," I said. Diane's hand stilled. "What box?" "The gray one, left side, under the shelves." Richard's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. That told me enough. "No," Diane said. "Flat. Immediate. That's family property." I smiled then. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. That box contains my journals, my graduate research notes, and documentation related to compliance projects I personally authored, I said. "You don't get to decide that it's family property just because it's in your house." "You're not thinking clearly," Diane replied. "Ever since you started working those hours, you've been off." There it was again. The narrative. Richard stood. "We're trying to help you. You've always been intense. You fixate. You hold grudges." I thought of the first time I noticed missing numbers in a vendor report. The night I stayed up until 3 a.m. reconciling discrepancies that saved the company a federal investigation. The board dinner, where Lauren got credit for a campaign I'd flagged as legally risky. Intensity, to them, was inconvenient competence. "I'm taking the box," I said. Diane stepped in front of the basement door. "Absolutely not." For a second, we stood there, mother and daughter, pearl necklace and navy blazer. Control versus refusal. "You already removed me from the company," I said quietly. "Do you really want to add theft to the list of things you're comfortable with?" Richard sighed. "Don't threaten us." "I'm not," I said. "I'm documenting." That was when Lauren appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, perfectly timed. She wore athleisure and a smug little smile, like she'd just finished a workout and was proud of it. "Wow," she said. "You really are spiraling." I turned to her. "Did you know they cut my access before I left the building?" She shrugged. "Standard protocol. For executives under investigation," I said. Her smile flickered. Diane snapped. "Enough! Evelyn, you're not welcome here right now." There it was. The exile. I looked at the three of them. My family, or what passed for it. And I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Fear. Not of me, of what I knew. "Fine," I said. "Keep the box." I picked up my bag and walked out. Behind me, Diane exhaled sharply, relief flooding her posture. They thought they'd won that round. They didn't know the copies already existed. Back in my apartment, I poured a glass of water and sat on the edge of my bed. My phone buzzed again. An email from HR. Formal language. Leave of absence paperwork attached. NDA reminder. Severance contingencies. And then a text from an unknown number. "You should stop digging. For your own sake." No name. No signature. I stared at the screen, pulse steady. They were watching now. That night, I logged into a personal cloud drive I'd been maintaining quietly since my 29th birthday. Inside were time-stamped backups, emails, memos, audio recordings from meetings where I'd been told to let it go. Screenshots of Lauren approving campaigns I'd flagged as non-compliant. A timeline. I added one more note. October 14th. Access revoked. Family coordinated. I didn't sleep much. Not from anxiety. From clarity. By morning, I knew two things. First, they weren't done with me. Second, I needed legal counsel that didn't answer to my last name. At 8:17 a.m., I called a number I'd saved months earlier and never expected to use. "Office of Rachel Monroe," a voice answered. "I need a lawyer," I said. "And I need one who understands corporate retaliation and family businesses." There was a pause. "May I ask who's calling?" "Evelyn Carter," I said. "And my family just made a very expensive mistake." When I hung up, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough." I didn't reply. I already knew what came next. And I was ready. Rachel Monroe's office didn't look like the kind of place where family empires went to die. It was small. Third floor of a converted brick building near the river. No receptionist desk made of marble. No oil paintings. Just clean lines, a coffee machine that hissed too loudly, and walls lined with framed verdicts instead of photos. Rachel Monroe herself stood when I walked in. Early 40s, dark blazer, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're punctual," she said. "That's already a good sign." "I don't waste time," I replied. She nodded once and gestured for me to sit. "Tell me what happened. Start with yesterday. Don't editorialize." So I didn't. I laid it out the way I would in a deposition. Dates, names, language used, who said what, and in what order. Richard Carter, Diane Carter, Lauren Carter, Mark Reynolds. The leave of absence, the access revocation, the basement box, the anonymous text. Rachel didn't interrupt. She took notes with a pen, not a tablet. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. "They coordinated this," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "And they didn't remove you quietly. They discredited you." "Yes." "Which means," she continued, "they're not just trying to sideline you. They're trying to make sure no one believes you if you speak." That landed. I'd been circling the thought without naming it. "Why now?" Rachel asked. I hesitated for the first time. Not because I didn't know. Because saying it out loud made it real. "There's a year-end restructuring coming," I said. "The company is merging 2 subsidiaries. Lauren's division is leading the rollout. I flagged compliance risks tied to overseas ad buys and third-party data brokers. Rachel's pen paused. How much money are we talking? 7 figures, I said. Potentially 8, depending on penalties. Rachel looked at me carefully. And you documented this? I documented everything. She nodded. Good. Because what they're doing now is preemptive. If regulators come knocking later, they'll say you are unstable, difficult, removed for cause. She didn't sugarcoat it. I respected that. And the box in the basement? She asked. I met her eyes. Contains original drafts, hard copies, handwritten notes from before the cloud backups existed. Rachel exhaled slowly. They know that. Yes. And they tried to keep you from retrieving it. Yes. Rachel stood and walked to the window, arms crossed. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. Evelyn, this isn't just retaliation. This is containment. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear. Focus. What do we do? I asked. We don't react, she said. We prepare. And we wait for them to escalate. I frowned. You think they will? Rachel turned back to me. People who believe they're losing control don't stop. They squeeze harder. As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed on the desk between us. Lauren Carter. I didn't answer. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You expect her to call? She hates leaving messages, I said. She prefers witnesses. Sure enough, my phone buzzed again. Then again. Rachel gestured. Put it on speaker. I did. Evelyn, Lauren said, voice light, too light. Why aren't you responding? I'm busy, I said. With what? She asked. Because Mom is really upset. You stormed out yesterday like a teenager. I left, I said. There's a difference. A pause. Then a laugh. You always do this. You blow things out of proportion. Rachel watched my face, not the phone. I'm not on leave, Lauren continued. You're not being punished. This is just optics. If you'd stop pushing back on everything. Lauren, I said calmly, are you calling as my sister or as a company officer? Another pause, shorter this time. As family, she said. Then stop recording this call, I replied. Silence. Rachel smiled faintly. That's not fair, Lauren said finally. You're being paranoid. No, I said. I'm being accurate. Her tone shifted, sharper now. You're going to ruin everything if you keep this up. Everything for who? I asked. For all of us, she snapped. Dad built this company. Mom sacrificed everything. You think your spreadsheets matter more than that? There it was. The hierarchy. Legacy over law. Blood over truth. I think facts matter, I said. Lauren exhaled hard. You know what? Fine. Do whatever you want. But don't expect an invitation to Thanksgiving if you keep acting like this. Thanksgiving. The word landed heavier than it should have. That's all? I asked. Yes, she said coldly. Consider this a courtesy call. She hung up. Rachel reached over and ended the call recording on my phone. Good instincts, she said. She wanted to provoke you. She always does, I replied. Rachel sat back down. I'm going to be blunt. Your family is going to try to isolate you socially before they move legally. How? I asked. She tapped her pen. Narratives. Concerned parents. A fragile daughter. Possibly a formal competency evaluation, if they think it'll stick. My jaw tightened. They wouldn't. Rachel met my gaze. They already implied it. They'll escalate if they think it buys them time. Time. That word again. What about the box? I asked. Rachel considered. We don't retrieve it yet. That's risky, I said. Yes, she agreed. But going back now confirms its value. We let them feel safe. Safe people get sloppy. I nodded slowly. Rachel slid a folder across the desk. In the meantime, we build leverage. Quietly. You'll file a formal complaint with the ethics committee. Not public, internal, time-stamped. They'll bury it, I said. Good, she replied. Buried complaints have a way of resurfacing when subpoenas arrive. I exhaled. And Evelyn, Rachel added. Stop answering family calls unless I'm present. Everything from here on out is evidence. When I left her office, the city looked different. Sharper. Less forgiving. I liked it that way. That evening, an email hit my inbox. From Carter Holdings Communications. Subject line. Internal announcement. I opened it. Effective immediately. Lauren Carter will be assuming interim oversight of regulatory operations to ensure continuity during organizational realignment. My division, given to her, just like that. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. We need to discuss Thanksgiving arrangements. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stared at the screen. They weren't done squeezing, and Thanksgiving was coming. Thanksgiving had always been my mother's stage. Every year, Diane Carter treated it like a production instead of a holiday. Place cards in calligraphy, linen napkins folded just so. The same stories told in the same order to the same people, all carefully curated to reinforce one idea. The Carters were solid, generous, and unshakable. This year, she wanted me at that table for a reason. I didn't reply to her message right away. I let it sit. Silence, when used correctly, makes people reveal their priorities. By the next morning, she sent another text. Your father is very disappointed in how you're handling this. Disappointed was her favorite word. It implied moral authority without having to explain anything. I forwarded both messages to Rachel Monroe and went about my day. At 10:43 a.m., my building manager emailed me to say a certified letter had arrived. The sender was Carter Holdings. That got my attention. I signed for it an hour later and opened it at my kitchen counter. The letter was short, polite, cold. Notice of internal review. Pending evaluation of recent conduct, Carter Holdings reserves the right to reassess severance eligibility should confidential information be disclosed. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning shot. They were laying groundwork. I called Rachel immediately. They're trying to gag you retroactively, she said after reading it. It won't hold, but it tells me something important. What? They're afraid you're talking, she replied, which means something is already moving without their permission. I hadn't spoken to anyone except her, yet. That afternoon, I met an old colleague for coffee. Not a friend, an acquaintance, someone neutral. Someone who had transferred out of Carter Holdings 2 years earlier after a disagreement with Lauren. His name was Daniel Price, former data analytics manager, now consulting independently. We didn't talk about my family at first. We talked about the weather, about how consulting paid better but slept worse. Normal things. Then he said, I heard Lauren's running compliance now. I didn't react. He stirred his coffee. That's bold. She's interim, I said. Daniel snorted softly. Sure. There was a pause. Then he leaned back slightly. Evelyn, I'm going to say something, and you can decide whether to hear it. I nodded. There's been chatter, he said, about an ad tech vendor called Silverline Metrics. My pulse stayed steady. Silverline was one of the vendors I'd flagged. They're under investigation, Daniel continued. Not officially, but quietly. FTC level, quietly. That was the first mini fracture. The first crack I hadn't caused. Lauren signed off on their expansion last quarter, he added. Overrode your risk memo, actually. People noticed. I took a sip of water. Why are you telling me this? Daniel met my eyes. Because when this breaks, they're going to say you approved it. That night, I pulled up my cloud archive and searched Silverline. 23 files surfaced. Emails, attachments, calendar invites. All time-stamped. All clear. I didn't feel relief. I felt confirmation. 2 days later, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to listen. Evelyn, Richard Carter said, voice low, controlled. Your mother wants you at Thanksgiving. I saw the message, I said. This doesn't have to be adversarial, he continued. Families disagree, but we don't air dirty laundry. Then why did you cut my access before I left the building? I asked. A beat. Then. That was HR. I didn't respond. We're offering you a path back, he said, if you cooperate. There it was. The deal. Define cooperate, I said. Stop talking to outsiders, he replied. Sign the reaffirmation agreement. Publicly support Lauren's interim role. And my concerns, I asked? We'll revisit them later. Later never comes. I'll think about Thanksgiving, I said. That's not what I asked, he snapped, irritation slipping through. I know, I said. That's my answer. He hung up. 3 hours later, Lauren posted a photo on Instagram. A shot of her in my old office. My desk. My chair. Captioned, Stepping up when it matters. I didn't comment. I screenshot it. That night, Rachel called me instead of texting. They've retained a psychiatrist, she said. I closed my eyes. For me? Not officially, she replied. Yet. But I'm hearing they're floating the idea that you're under stress, burnout, obsessive tendencies, my mother's language. Recycled. Can they do that? I asked. They can try, Rachel said. Especially if they frame it as concern. I laughed once. Short, sharp. What? She asked. They always do, I said. Rachel paused. Evelyn, I need to know something. Have you ever given them reason to question your mental stability? Meds, therapy, anything they could twist? No, I said. And even if I had, it wouldn't be their business. Good, she replied. Because if they go that route, it becomes nuclear. The next envelope arrived the following morning. Handwritten address. No return label. Inside was a Thanksgiving place card. Evelyn, in my mother's precise script. And a note. Family comes first. Don't embarrass us. I stared at it for a long time. They wanted me visible, controlled, smiling. They wanted witnesses. A curated version of me, at that table, so they could say later, she was fine. She was happy. She never objected. Rachel was right. They were escalating. I called her and told her everything. Go, she said after a moment. What? I asked. Go to Thanksgiving, Rachel said. Say very little. Observe everything. That's dangerous, I replied. Yes, she said calmly. But it's also where people get sloppy. I looked at the place card again. Bring nothing, Rachel added. No documents, no devices. Just your eyes and your memory. And if they push? I asked. They will, she said. Let them. I hung up and placed the card in my kitchen drawer. Thanksgiving was 5 days away. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the table. I was curious about who would crack first. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright. The kind of day my mother loved because it photographed well. I arrived at the house in Evanston 10 minutes late, on purpose. Not enough to be rude, enough to disrupt rhythm. Diane Carter noticed immediately. She always did. She met me at the door wearing a soft cashmere sweater and a smile that never reached her eyes. You look tired, she said, instead of hello. Long week, I replied. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Everything looked exactly the same as it had for years. Same centerpiece, same china, same seating chart taped discreetly to the pantry door, except my name. I glanced at the chart. Evelyn was written at the far end of the table, between my Aunt Susan and a man I barely recognized, one of my father's donors. Lauren Carter's name sat to my father's right, where mine used to be. Small moves, clear messages. Richard Carter emerged from the living room, already holding a drink. You made it, he said, like I'd surprised him. I said I would, I answered. Lauren swept in behind him, radiant and loud, kissing cheeks, performing. She paused when she reached me. Her smile thinned. Wow, she said. I wasn't sure you'd show. I wasn't sure you wanted me to, I replied. She laughed too quickly. Of course I did. We're family. Family. There it was again. Before dinner, my mother insisted on photos. She always did. She positioned us carefully. Lauren centered, me slightly angled, half a step back. Closer, Evelyn, Diane said sharply. You look distant. I stepped forward. The camera flashed. Later, when the wine was poured and plates were filled, conversation flowed the way it always did. Controlled, polite, superficial. No one mentioned the company. No one mentioned my leave. Until Richard did. He cleared his throat mid-meal. Lauren's been doing remarkable work this quarter, he said, cutting turkey with precision. Stepping into a very complex role. Lauren dipped her head modestly. It's been challenging, she said, but some of us thrive under pressure. Eyes flicked toward me. Subtle, intentional. I chewed slowly, swallowed, said nothing. Mini hook, right there. Silence makes people uncomfortable. My Aunt Susan filled the gap. Evelyn, dear, are you still consulting? Consulting. Another polite downgrade. I'm evaluating options, I said. Richard smiled thinly. Taking time to reflect can be healthy, Diane nodded. Especially when someone has been pushing themselves too hard. I looked at my plate, counted my breaths. Rachel's voice echoed in my head. Observe everything. Halfway through dessert, Lauren leaned toward me, voice low but audible enough to carry. You should be careful, she said. People talk. I met her gaze. About what? She shrugged. Burnout, emotional instability. You disappearing like this doesn't help. There it was. The narrative. Served with pie. I didn't rise to it. I didn't defend myself. I let it hang. Across the table, my cousin Mark shifted uncomfortably. He worked in finance. He knew how stories like this ended. Diane set her fork down deliberately. Evelyn, she said. We're worried. Again. I'm sure, I replied. Your father and I think it might be good for you to speak to someone, she continued. Just to check in. A therapist? I asked. A professional, Richard said quickly. Neutral. I nodded once. You already hired one. The table went still. Lauren laughed nervously. What? I know you retained Dr. Alan Weiss, I said calmly. Clinical evaluations, corporate referrals. Richard's face hardened. That's not appropriate dinner conversation. You brought it up, I said. Diane's smile faltered for the first time all night. We just want to make sure you're okay. I am, I said. But let me be clear. Any evaluation conducted without my consent will be documented as coercive. Silence again. Thicker this time, Lauren scoffed. You always make things sound so dramatic. No, I said. I make them accurate. My father stood abruptly. Enough. This holiday is not about business. I looked around the table, at the donors, the cousins, the carefully curated audience. You're right, I said. It's not. I stood, calm, controlled. But since we're here, I should clarify something, I continued. I did not approve the Silverline Metrics expansion. Lauren's fork clattered against her plate. That decision was made after my access was limited, I added. By Lauren. Against written compliance guidance. Richard slammed his glass down. Sit down. I will, I said. In a moment, I looked at the table, at every face watching me. I'm saying this now so no one is confused later. Diane's voice trembled. Evelyn, stop, I smiled. Small. Cold. Thank you for dinner. And I sat back down. No shouting, no accusations. Just a line drawn quietly across the table. Dessert ended early. As I left, my mother followed me into the hallway. You embarrassed us, she hissed. No, I said. I warned you. Outside, the air was sharp. Clean. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Unknown number, again. You should have kept quiet. This won't end well for you. I forwarded the message to Rachel. She called me immediately. Good, she said, after I told her everything. Very good. That didn't feel good, I replied. It wasn't supposed to, she said. But now we have witnesses, and they know you won't play along. I leaned against my car, looking back at the house. Lights glowing, curtains drawn. What happens next? I asked. Rachel's voice was steady. Now they panic. If this chapter feels familiar, if you've ever sat at a table where silence was safer than truth, pause here. Like the story, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you've ever been labeled difficult for refusing to disappear. Because what came after Thanksgiving wasn't a conversation. It was a confrontation. The first call came 2 days after Thanksgiving. Not from my parents, not from Lauren, from Human Resources. The woman on the line introduced herself as Karen Whitfield, Interim HR Director at Carter Holdings. Her voice was calm, practiced, deliberately neutral. We're conducting a routine wellness check, she said. Given recent events, I almost smiled. Define routine, I replied. A brief conversation, Karen said. Off the record. Just to make sure you're supported. I pictured Diane Carter rehearsing those words in front of a mirror. I'm represented by counsel, I said. All communication should go through Rachel Monroe. A pause. A recalibration. Of course, Karen said. We'll note that. An hour later, Rachel called. They moved faster than I expected, she said. Which means Thanksgiving rattled them. What's the play? I asked. They're building a paper trail, Rachel replied. Concerned outreach. Wellness language. If they can't silence you, they'll discredit you. That night, a delivery arrived at my apartment. A gift basket. Expensive. Neutral. Herbal teas. Candles. A card with no sender. Thinking of you. Take care of yourself. I didn't open it. I photographed it. The next morning, my building concierge called. "Miss Carter, there's someone here asking about you." "Who?" I asked. "A man," he said. "Says he's a family physician." I told him to send the man away. Rachel was quiet when I told her. Then she said, "They're escalating, from suggestion to intrusion." "How far will they go?" I asked. "As far as you let them," she replied, and then a little further. By Thursday, Lauren made her move. She didn't call. She posted a long, emotional LinkedIn update about leadership, resilience, and stepping up when family dynamics are challenging. It was vague enough to be deniable, specific enough to sting. Several comments mentioned grace under pressure and doing what's best for the company. I recognized the strategy immediately. If they couldn't make me look unstable privately, they'd make me look absent publicly. I forwarded the post to Rachel. "She's laying groundwork," Rachel said. "When the compliance issue breaks, she'll say you weren't involved, that she protected you." Protected. Another word with teeth. That afternoon, Daniel Price texted me. "You should know. Silverline just froze payments to 3 contractors. Something's wrong." Mini hook. Quiet. Dangerous. I didn't reply immediately. I pulled at my archive again. Cross-referenced dates, Lauren's approval, vendor timelines. The pattern was there. Clearer than before. That night, my father called again. I let it go to voicemail. "Evelyn," Richard said, voice strained. "This is getting out of hand. We need to speak. In person." I listened twice. He sounded tired, not guilty, cornered. Rachel advised against meeting him alone, so I didn't. Instead, I sent one email to the Carter Holdings Ethics Committee. Subject line: "Formal notice of retaliation and compliance obstruction." Attached? Nothing, just a statement. This notice serves to formally document my concern regarding retaliatory actions taken following my internal compliance advisories, including, but not limited to, access revocation, reputational harm, and coercive wellness interventions. Supporting documentation will be provided upon request. Time-stamped. Logged. Rachel called 10 minutes later. "You just forced their hand," she said. "Good," I replied. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. From cousins, from former colleagues, from people who had never spoken to me before. "Are you okay? Heard things are tense. Let me know if you need anything." The rumor mill was spinning. By noon, Carter Holdings issued an internal memo. Effective immediately, all inquiries related to regulatory matters must be directed through interim leadership to ensure clarity and consistency. Translation: Don't talk to Evelyn. Rachel sent me a screenshot with one line beneath it. "They're isolating you." I stared at the screen, then at my apartment. Quiet. Clean. Mine. Isolation only works if you're afraid of being alone. That evening, Rachel asked me to come by her office. When I arrived, she had a file open on her desk. Thick. New. "I pulled something," she said. "Off record. A favor from someone at the FTC." My pulse didn't change, but my attention sharpened. "There's a preliminary inquiry tied to Silverline metrics," she continued. "Not public. Yet." "Who's named?" I asked. "Not individuals," she said. "The company. For now." "For now," I echoed. Rachel slid the file toward me. "If this becomes formal, they'll need a narrative, a scapegoat, or a whistleblower." I understood immediately. "They'll pick scapegoat," I said. "They already tried," she replied. "It didn't stick." I leaned back. "So they'll try harder." "Yes," Rachel said. "And here's the part you need to prepare for." She paused. "Deliberate. They're likely to challenge your credibility directly, publicly, through legal means." "Define challenge," I said. "Petition," she replied, "for a competency evaluation, or a claim that your actions constitute breach of fiduciary duty." My mother's voice echoed in my head. "You're not thinking clearly." I nodded slowly. "When?" "Soon," Rachel said, "before the inquiry becomes official." That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a legal pad. I wrote names, dates, patterns, and one line at the top: "They think I need them. They were wrong." At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, again. "Last chance. Step back, or this gets ugly." I stared at the message. Then I typed a reply for the first time. "All future contact should be directed to my attorney." I turned off my phone and went to sleep, because the next move wouldn't be quiet, and it wouldn't be private. It would be on paper. The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, thick and unmistakably legal. It was slid under my apartment door sometime between midnight and dawn. No knock, no warning, just pressure applied quietly, the way my family preferred it. Petition for independent medical evaluation. I read the title twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain this was real. Filed by Carter Holdings. Signed by Richard Carter. Co-signed by Diane Carter. My parents. The stated concern was my increasingly erratic behavior, my obsessive fixation on internal processes, and my potential inability to make sound professional judgments during periods of emotional stress. It was written in careful language, polished, clinical, designed to sound reasonable. I didn't feel panic. I felt insulted. I called Rachel Monroe before I even finished my coffee. They did it, I said. She exhaled once. I was hoping they'd wait another week. Why? I asked. Because now, she said, we stopped playing defense. By noon, Rachel had me in her office with a yellow legal pad and a copy of the petition marked up in red. They're claiming concern, not control, she said. That matters. To whom? I asked. To a judge, she replied. Concern sounds benevolent. Control sounds predatory. I leaned back. So how do we make it look like what it is? Rachel's mouth curved slightly. We don't make it look like anything. We let it speak for itself. She slid another document across the desk. My employment record, performance reviews, commendations, bonuses, board emails praising my diligence and risk management. All dated right up until the moment I challenged Lauren's vendor approvals. They're saying you became unstable, Rachel said. We show a timeline. You didn't change. Their tolerance did. The hearing was scheduled fast. Too fast. 3 days later. Emergency docket. Richard wanted this done before anything else surfaced. The night before the hearing, my mother called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Evelyn, Diane said, voice tight with something close to desperation. This is not an attack. This is protection. You're clearly under stress, and we can't just stand by. Stand by. As if they ever had. I deleted the message without replying. The courthouse was downtown, stone and glass, sterile in that way meant to project neutrality. Rachel met me outside the courtroom 15 minutes early. They'll bring their own evaluator, she said quietly. Someone friendly. I won't consent, I replied. You don't have to, she said. But listen carefully. Let them talk. Richard and Diane arrived together. Coordinated outfits, calm faces. Lauren didn't come. That wasn't an accident. My father nodded stiffly at me. My mother avoided my eyes. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and an efficient demeanor, called the case without ceremony. Rachel spoke first. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out facts. My role, my record. The timing of the access revocation, the Thanksgiving incident, the ethics notice, the Silverline vendor concerns. Then she handed over a single page, a timeline. Opposing counsel tried to interrupt. The judge waved him off. Richard's lawyer stood next. This is about safety, he said. Ms. Carter has exhibited withdrawal, fixation, and paranoia. I watched my father as those words landed. He didn't flinch. Concerned parents, the lawyer continued, a responsible corporation. The judge turned to me. Miss Carter, she said, do you believe you're unwell? No, I replied. Do you believe your parents are acting in your best interest? I paused. Not for effect, for honesty. I believe they're acting in their own, I said. The judge studied me. Rachel stood again. Your Honor, we object to the framing of this petition. It is not about Miss Carter's health. It is about silencing a compliance officer. Opposing counsel scoffed. That's speculation. Rachel nodded. Then let's look at motive. She submitted one more document. An internal email from Mark Reynolds, forwarded, time-stamped, sent 2 hours after my access was revoked. If Evelyn escalates externally, we'll need to manage perception quickly. The courtroom went quiet. The judge read it twice. Richard shifted in his seat. Mr. Carter, the judge said, looking directly at my father. Why was this email sent before any wellness concerns were documented? Richard opened his mouth, closed it. We were Anticipating, he said. Anticipating what? The judge asked. Conflict, he replied. Rachel leaned forward. Conflict with the truth, she said softly. The judge denied the petition. Not with drama, with finality. There is insufficient evidence to compel an evaluation, she said. This court does not exist to adjudicate family disputes masquerading as concern. My mother's face drained of color. As we left the courtroom, Richard grabbed my arm. This isn't over, he hissed. I looked down at his hand, then back at his face. It is, I said. You just don't know it yet. Outside, Rachel handed me a copy of the ruling. They'll retaliate, she said. Harder. I know, I replied. What do you want to do next? She asked. I thought of Lauren's LinkedIn post, the frozen contractor payments, the FTC files. I want to stop reacting, I said. I want to move. Rachel nodded. Then it's time. That night, I opened my archive again. And this time, I didn't add notes. I started organizing exhibits. Because the next confrontation wouldn't be about my mental state, it would be about theirs. The morning after the hearing, my father resigned. Not publicly, not loudly. Quietly, through a press release that framed it as a temporary step back for health reasons. Diane's language. Polished. Protective. A narrative already in place. Lauren Carter was named acting chief operating officer the same day. That was the first move. The second came 12 hours later. Rachel Monroe called me just after midnight. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. They're accelerating, she said. Silverline's legal team requested a delay on disclosures. Carter Holdings approved it. That violates protocol, I replied. Yes, she said. And it's traceable. I sat up in bed. Who signed? Lauren, Rachel answered. Mini hook. Small, sharp, irreversible. By the end of the week, the rumors reached the press. Not headlines, side notes, industry whispers. Carter Holdings facing internal leadership transitions amid regulatory uncertainty. Lauren gave an interview. Soft lighting, controlled questions. We're committed to transparency, she said. We're also a family business. These moments are emotional. Emotional. Again. She never mentioned my name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. Rachel and I watched the clip in her office. She's positioning herself as the stabilizer, Rachel said. Which means she's about to paint you as the destabilizing force. I know, I said. Let her. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You're comfortable with that? I'm counting on it, I replied. Silence can only protect you if the other side stays quiet. Lauren wouldn't. That afternoon, Daniel Price emailed me a spreadsheet. No message, just the file. I opened it slowly. Payment delays, contract freezes, vendor communications, all tied to Silverline, all routed through an internal project code I recognized immediately. My old code. My system. They were using my compliance architecture to bypass compliance. I forwarded the file to Rachel. She called within minutes. This changes things, she said. This isn't just retaliation anymore. This is obstruction. What does that buy us? I asked. Leverage, she replied. But only if we time it right. Timing. Always timing. The next escalation didn't come from the company. It came from my mother. She showed up at my apartment unannounced. I saw her through the peephole first. Perfect hair, neutral coat, purse clutched like a shield. I didn't open the door. Evelyn, she called softly. I know you're in there. I stayed silent. I'm not here to fight, Diane said. I'm here to help. Help. The most dangerous word in her vocabulary. I know you're angry, she continued, but you're hurting the family. There it was. The guilt hook. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. What do you want? I asked. She scanned the apartment behind me, eyes quick, calculating. You look thin, she said. I'm fine, I replied. She sighed dramatically. Your father is unwell. I didn't respond. He's stepping away because of the stress, she added. Because of this. This, I repeated. Meaning me? She met my gaze. You could stop all of this. How? I asked. She leaned in. Withdraw the ethics complaint. Issue a statement of support for Lauren. Privately. We'll take care of the rest. And Silverline, I asked? Her eyes flickered. Business is complicated. No, I said. Lies are. Diane's expression hardened. You always were difficult. I nodded. And you always needed me to be quiet. She straightened. If you continue down this path, you'll lose everything. I already lost you, I replied. And I survived. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Cold. Controlled. You think you're so prepared, she said. But you don't understand how this works. I do, I said. You just don't like it. She left without another word. That night, Rachel and I made a decision. We stopped waiting. We filed a supplemental ethics report. Detailed, documented, attached exhibits, vendor timelines, payment freezes, internal approvals. We CC'd the board and the FTC. The response was immediate. Carter Holdings issued a statement denying wrongdoing and placing Lauren on temporary leave pending review. Temporary. The word of the year. The board convened an emergency session. Rachel was invited. I wasn't. That was fine. I didn't need a seat at the table anymore. I needed the table to collapse. 2 days later, the FTC inquiry became formal. Lauren's LinkedIn went silent. Richard resurfaced with a lawyer. Diane stopped calling. And for the first time since this began, no one told me to calm down. Rachel called me into her office again, eyes sharp. They're going to try one last thing, she said. What? I asked. A settlement, she replied. Private. Generous. With a silence clause. I considered it. Briefly. No, I said. Rachel smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Why? I asked. Because now, she said, sliding a folder across the desk, we go public. Inside were draft disclosures, press inquiries, a timeline ready for daylight. Rachel met my eyes. Once this moves forward, she said, there's no controlling the narrative. I closed the folder. Good, I said. I'm done letting them tell my story. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed one last time. From Lauren. You've gone too far, I typed back slowly. You taught me how. I turned off the phone because the next chapter wouldn't belong to my family. It would belong to the record. The first headline went live at 6:12 a.m. I know the exact time because Rachel Monroe texted me a screenshot while I was still lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city wake up. Carter Holdings faces federal inquiry over vendor practices and internal retaliation claims. It wasn't explosive. Not yet. But it was real. And once something is real in print, it stops being a family argument and starts being a public problem. By 7 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers. Reporters who pretended they weren't reporters. Old colleagues who suddenly remembered my name. One message from a board member I'd never trusted. Hope you're taking care of yourself. That one almost made me laugh. Rachel told me not to respond to anyone. Let the story breathe, she said. Silence is still your strongest move. At 9:30 a.m., Carter Holdings released their counterstatement. They always did. The language was defensive but polished. Emphasized cooperation. Emphasized former employee grievances. Emphasized family values. Lauren Carter's name appeared only once, placed on administrative leave pending outcome of review. Administrative leave. Temporary. A holding pattern. By noon, Silverline Metrics suspended operations. That was the moment everything tipped. Because Silverline wasn't just a vendor, it was a hub. Contractors depended on them. Smaller agencies depended on them. When they froze, panic spread. And panic makes people talk. Daniel Price called me directly that afternoon. You were right, he said without preamble. They're scrambling. What are you hearing? I asked. Internal emails, he replied. People are trying to distance themselves. Lauren's team is deleting files. Too late. Rachel had already anticipated that. At 2 p.m., she filed a preservation order. Every email, every approval, every timestamp. Frozen. When I got to Rachel's office that evening, she looked almost relaxed. They've lost control of the timeline, she said. Now they're reacting to it. I sat across from her. What about my parents? Rachel exhaled. Richard Carter's counsel requested a private meeting. I felt my jaw tighten. To what end? To negotiate, she said. He wants this contained. Contained. Like a spill. Like damage. And you? I asked. I told them no meeting without you, Rachel replied. He declined. I nodded. That was consistent. They also floated a settlement, she added. 7 figures. Full release, Non-disclosure. There it was. The price of silence. I didn't answer immediately. Rachel waited. "No," I said finally. She smiled. "Good." That night, the second headline dropped. Former compliance director alleges coordinated retaliation at Carter Holdings. This one mentioned my name. Full name: Evelyn Carter, 32. Former director of regulatory operations. They used my title correctly. That mattered more than I expected. The article was factual, dry. It quoted documents. It quoted timelines. And it quoted me once. "I did my job," I said in the piece. "I wasn't prepared to disappear to protect someone else's risk." My mother called an hour later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice wasn't controlled this time. It was thin, strained. "You've humiliated us," Diane said. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" People. Always people. "I hope you're proud," she added. "Your grandmother would be ashamed." That one landed differently. I forwarded the voicemail to Rachel and deleted it. The next morning, the board removed Lauren permanently. Permanent sounded heavier than administrative. By midday, Richard Carter issued a personal statement. He took responsibility for oversight failures and announced his full resignation. No mention of me. No apology. Just exit language. I watched the clip online from my kitchen table, coffee cooling in my mug. He looked older, smaller. A man stepping out of a story he could no longer control. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. That afternoon, the FTC confirmed formal charges. Carter Holdings stock dipped 12% before trading was halted. Rachel called me. "It's moving faster than expected," she said. "You okay?" "Yes," I replied. And for the first time, it was true. That evening, I went for a walk along the river. The air was cold, clear. My phone stayed in my pocket. A woman passed me, talking animatedly into her headset. A couple laughed on a bench. Life kept going. I realized something as I walked. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for validation. I was done waiting. When I got home, I checked my email once. There was a message from the board. They wanted to formally acknowledge my contributions. They wanted to offer a consulting role once the dust settled. I deleted it. Another email sat beneath it. From a journalist. "We're doing a follow-up piece on whistleblowers and family-run corporations. Would you be willing to speak?" I closed my laptop without responding. Not yet. If this chapter feels familiar, if you've ever been asked to stay quiet so others could stay comfortable, pause here. Like the story, subscribe if you haven't, and if you've ever had to choose between belonging and self-respect, tell me in the comments. Because the truth is, exposure isn't the end. It's the beginning of consequences, and mine were just getting started. The quiet after exposure is never peaceful. It's hollow, suspended, like the moment after a building collapses, when the dust hasn't settled enough to show who's still standing. 3 days after the FTC announcement, my phone finally stopped ringing. Reporters moved on to fresh angles. Commentators replaced speculation with facts. Carter Holdings was no longer a family drama. It was a case file. That's when my father tried one last time. Not with a call, not with a lawyer, with a letter, handwritten, folded carefully, delivered by courier, not mail. The return address was his personal residence, not the company. I didn't open it right away. I made tea. I stood at the window. I let myself feel nothing. Then I opened it. "Evelyn, I never thought it would come to this. I want you to know that everything I did was to protect the family. You may not see it now, but one day you'll understand that leadership requires sacrifice." Sacrifice. His favorite word when he wanted obedience. Your mother is struggling. Lauren is devastated. We've lost more than you can imagine. That line almost worked. Almost. You still have time to stop this from getting worse. If you withdraw your statements and cooperate with our counsel, we can still repair some of the damage. You don't have to carry this burden alone. Burden. Not truth. Not accountability. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then I shredded it. That afternoon, Rachel called with news I hadn't expected. "The Department of Justice is circling," she said. I closed my eyes. "Criminal?" "Potentially," she replied. if obstruction can be proven. And me? I asked. You're a witness, she said. A credible one. Credible. After everything they tried to make me. The next escalation came from an unexpected place. My Aunt Susan. She called late, voice unsteady. Evelyn, she said, your mother asked me to talk to you. I listened. She's telling people you're being manipulated, Susan continued. That a lawyer put ideas in your head. I smiled faintly. Of course she is. They're saying you're unstable, Susan said quietly. That this is a phase. I thanked her for the warning and ended the call. Rachel wasn't surprised. That's the last defense, she said. If the facts hold, they attack the person. By the end of the week, the final internal audit report leaked. It was devastating. Unauthorized vendor approvals, suppressed risk memos, payment routing through shell entities. All during Lauren's tenure. My name appeared only in one section. Original objections noted and overridden. That line followed me for days. People I'd never met emailed to thank me. Others asked for advice. Some just said, I'm sorry you went through that. One message stood out. From a woman named Claire Matthews. I was pushed out of my family's company 5 years ago. I stayed quiet. I wish I hadn't. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. That night, Rachel invited me to dinner. Not to strategize. To eat. We sat in a small Italian place near her office. No phones. No files. You've done everything right, she said, finally. You know that? I know I did what I had to, I replied. That's more than most people manage, she said. I thought about my mother, my sister, the table at Thanksgiving. I don't feel victorious, I admitted. Rachel nodded. Revenge isn't fireworks, she said. It's relief. On the way home, I passed the Carter Holdings building. The lights were off on the top floors. I didn't slow down. 2 days later, the DOJ confirmed charges against multiple executives. Lauren's name was included. Richard's was under review. My mother stopped appearing in public. And I received one final email from Carter Holdings. Termination of employment. Effective retroactively to the date of leave initiation. No severance. No acknowledgement, just closure. I forwarded it to Rachel. She replied with one word, perfect, because now there was no illusion left to protect, only consequences. And something else, quietly forming beneath the wreckage. Freedom. The silence after termination felt different than I expected. Not loud, not dramatic, clean. No inbox to check, no crisis to manage, no family obligation disguised as duty. Just space. For the first time since I was 23, my calendar was empty. I didn't rush to fill it. I slept. I walked. I cooked meals that took longer than 15 minutes. I let my body catch up to the years my mind had been running ahead of it. 2 weeks after the DOJ announcement, Rachel called me into her office again. This one isn't a fire, she said when I arrived. It's an invitation. From the FTC, they wanted a formal statement. Recorded. On the record. Not a deposition. A narrative account. Do I need to? I asked. No, Rachel said. But it helps. I nodded once. I'll do it. The interview took 3 hours. No raised voices, no accusations. Just questions, answered carefully. Dates, names, decisions, emails. When it was over, the investigator closed his folder and looked at me differently than when we started. You know, he said, most people don't document like this. I wasn't planning to need it, I replied. He nodded. That's usually when it matters. Afterward, Rachel and I sat quietly in her office. You're officially done reacting, she said. From here on out, things move without you. That should have scared me. It didn't. Because the truth was, I had already moved. The job offers started coming in slowly. Consulting firms, compliance advisory boards, startups that wanted someone who understood systems and pressure. I turned most of them down, not because they weren't good, because I wasn't ready to step back into someone else's structure. One afternoon, Claire Matthews emailed me again. Would you consider coffee? I met her the following week. She was older than me by a decade, wiser in the way people get after surviving something quietly. I stayed, she said. I paid for it. You didn't. I almost did, I replied. She smiled. That's still enough. Word spread in quieter ways than headlines. People reached out privately. Women, men, professionals who had been sidelined in family businesses, partnerships, organizations where loyalty was weaponized. I listened, more than I spoke. Then I started writing, not for the press, not for court, for myself. I wrote about systems, about silence, about how control doesn't always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like concern. Rachel read one piece and raised an eyebrow. You know, she said, this could be something. Maybe, I replied, but not yet. The hardest part came unexpectedly. My mother sent a package, no note, no return address. Inside was a photo album, childhood pictures, vacations, holidays, carefully curated memories. I flipped through it slowly, every photo where Lauren stood centered, every photo where I stood slightly off to the side. I closed the album and placed it back in the box. Some histories don't deserve archive. That night, I dreamed of the Thanksgiving table. Not the fight, not the tension, the empty chairs. When I woke up, I felt lighter. The final court filing came on a Friday. Lauren accepted a plea deal. Richard avoided charges, but agreed to a lifetime ban from executive leadership in any regulated corporation. Carter Holdings restructured completely. New board, new name. The Carter legacy ended without ceremony. Rachel called me with the update. How do you feel? She asked. I considered it. Done, I said. She laughed softly. That's the best outcome. The following Monday, I signed a lease. Small office, corner unit, brick walls, good light. On the door, I placed a simple nameplate. Evelyn Carter, Independent Compliance Consultant. No logo, no slogan, just my name. That afternoon, I received an email from Claire. You gave me courage. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, I replied, you already had it. You just needed permission to use it. As I locked up the office that evening, I realized something. I wasn't rebuilding. I was choosing. And that made all the difference. Because revenge isn't about watching someone fall. It's about standing somewhere they can no longer reach you. The next chapter of my life wasn't going to be loud, but it was going to be mine. The last thing to arrive was the quiet. Not the kind that echoes, not the kind that waits for noise to interrupt it. This quiet stayed. It settled into corners. It followed me home and didn't ask questions. 6 months after everything collapsed, winter arrived without drama. No emergency calls, no subpoenas, no family messages routed through third parties. Just cold air, early sunsets, and the slow return of normal rhythms. On Christmas morning, I woke up alone. No table to set, no performance to manage, no silent competition disguised as tradition. I made coffee and watched the city wake up. For years, Christmas had been the sharpest reminder of where I stood. Forgotten birthdays, gifts that felt like afterthoughts, conversations that paused when I entered the room. It wasn't the holiday that hurt. It was the pattern. This year, the pattern was broken. Around noon, I checked my email. There was a message from a woman named Marisol Vega, a former CFO pushed out of her family's manufacturing company after she questioned inventory discrepancies. Another from a man in Ohio who'd been excluded from an inheritance after refusing to sign a false affidavit. They weren't asking for legal advice. They were asking how I survived the moment after everything fell apart. I answered each one carefully, not with strategy, with truth. That afternoon, I walked to the office. The building was quiet. Most people were home. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me up. I unlocked the door and stood in the empty space, coat still on, hands in my pockets. This office wasn't impressive. No marble, no glass walls, no assistants hovering. But it was honest. On the desk sat a single, framed photo. My grandmother, Eleanor Carter, the only person in my family who never asked me to shrink. She used to say, "Pay attention to who needs you silent. That's where the danger lives." She had been right. The final legal notices arrived in January. Carter Holdings' assets were fully dissolved. The family trust was frozen, pending restitution. Properties sold. Accounts seized. I read the filings once, then filed them away. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt alignment. What they lost wasn't mine to carry. In February, I was invited to speak at a small conference in Denver. No cameras, no headlines, just a room full of professionals who'd lived in the gray areas of loyalty and ethics. I told my story without names. I talked about manipulation disguised as care, about how favoritism isn't always loud, about how silence can be both a shield and a prison. When I finished, no one clapped right away. Then a woman in the front row stood up. "Thank you," she said. I thought it was just me. That was when I understood the reach of what had happened. This wasn't just revenge. It was recognition. In March, my mother tried once more. Not directly, through a mutual acquaintance. "She's asking if you're happy," the woman said awkwardly over lunch. I smiled politely. "Tell her I'm well. Do you want her to know anything else?" I shook my head. No. Some doors don't need closing. They stay shut on their own. By spring, my consulting work was steady. I chose clients carefully. I refused companies that wanted image repair without accountability. I walked away from money that came with silence clauses. Every no made the yes cleaner. One evening, Claire invited me to dinner. She brought a bottle of wine and a smile that looked lighter than the last time I'd seen her. "I resigned today," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Not in defeat," she added quickly. "In choice." We toasted to that. Later, as I walked home, I thought about the word that had followed me through every chapter of my life. Burden. They said I was one. They said truth was one. They said accountability was one. But burdens don't lift you. They don't set you free. What I carried wasn't weight. It was clarity. The final message came unexpectedly from Lauren. No subject line. No greeting. Just one sentence. I hope it was worth it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed my response. It wasn't about you. I didn't wait for a reply. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the windows open. The city hummed below. Somewhere, someone laughed. A siren passed, then faded. Life continued, and so did I. If you're listening to this, and you recognize yourself somewhere in my story, here's what I want you to know. You're not cruel for choosing yourself. You're not disloyal for refusing to be erased. And you don't owe anyone silence to keep their version of peace intact. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been pushed aside, excluded, or underestimated by the people who should have protected you, take a moment to like this, subscribe, or share your experience in the comments. Not for validation, for connection. Because the most dangerous thing you can do to people who control you through guilt is survive without them. My name is Evelyn Carter. I didn't burn the house down. I walked out, and that was enough.